Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we'll be exploring the fascinating world of personality assessments. But with a twist, we're going to be looking at two platforms that approach the whole "who am I" question from very different angles. 16 Personalities and the Spiritual Seek. So have you ever wondered if your personality is a fixed thing or something that's constantly evolving? Well, that's one of the core differences we'll be exploring today. 16 Personalities, you see, loves data. It loves giving you a neat little four-letter type to sum you up, while the Spiritual Seek leans more on philosophy and self-reflection, taking cues from thinkers like Socrates and Plato.
Interesting.
It's going to be fascinating to see how these contrasting approaches play out, so let's jump right in.
Absolutely. It is really intriguing how both platforms are essentially trying to illuminate the same thing, the core of who we are, our personalities. But they use such distinct methods to get there. 16 Personalities, which stems from the Myers-Briggs tradition, has a very practical approach. It wants you to pinpoint those strengths and weaknesses so you can use those insights for things like, choosing a career path or working on personal development. Whereas the Spiritual Seek takes a more humanistic approach, encouraging you to look inward and see your personality as something dynamic that's always in flux.
Right. Okay, so let's start with 16 Personalities. One thing that really jumps out is how they've grouped personalities into those four distinct categories. You've got the analysts, those logical thinkers. You've got the diplomats, the empathetic peacemakers, the sentinels, who are all about order and structure, and of course the explorers, those adaptable, spontaneous types. It's almost like they've created a personality map of these four distinct regions.
Yeah. And that's a really good point. That categorization is quite typical of what we often refer to as that Anglo-Saxon data-driven mindset, this drive to categorize and standardize. It can be very useful, of course, like organizing a library into sections, but it doesn't always capture the full picture.
Right. And it makes me think about how 16 Personalities uses those agree or disagree scales in their questions.
Yeah.
Do you think that might oversimplify things a bit? Like someone might agree with a statement for a totally different reason than what the test designers had in mind?
That's a fascinating point because you've hit on both a strength and a weakness of the system there. It's easy to understand and accessible, but it doesn't always capture the nuances of why you might choose a particular answer. Someone could strongly agree with a statement for a reason that's totally different from someone else who also strongly agrees.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, let's switch gears a bit and explore the Spiritual Seek. One thing that immediately struck me about their tests was how they use full sentences for the answer choices, almost like mini arguments. Instead of just a simple agree or disagree, what's the reasoning behind that?
That right there tells you a lot about their philosophical approach. They're not just collecting data points, you see. They're encouraging the user to truly think deeply. The Spiritual Seek wants you to weigh each option and its implications, almost like you're having an internal debate with yourself.
Yeah, I see what you mean. It's like they're tapping into that Socratic method of self-examination through dialogue.
Exactly. And that ties directly into their humanistic approach. They're not trying to box you in with a label. They're more interested in how your mind operates, which connects to their belief that personality is something fluid and always evolving.
I see. And they have some interesting tests beyond the typical personality assessments, don't they? I was particularly intrigued by the mental age test.
Yes. The mental age test is a fascinating one. Because it's not about your literal age at all, you see. It's more about assessing the flexibility and openness of your mindset. Do you approach the world with a sense of curiosity and wonder, or have you become more rigid in your thinking?
So if you're stuck in your ways and resistant to new ideas, you might have an older mental age even if you're chronologically young.
That's the idea. And then they have this awareness test, which explores how you perceive information.
Oh, interesting. Can you give us an example of what that looks like? What kind of awareness are they trying to measure?
Think of it this way. If you walk into a room and you instantly sense the mood, or if you can pick up on subtle cues in a conversation that others might miss, those are forms of awareness. The Spiritual Seek uses scenarios and dilemmas to see how you gather information and form opinions. Do you jump to conclusions? Or do you consider multiple perspectives? Can you see past the obvious?
So it's less about, like, are you aware of your surroundings, and more about how do you process and make sense of what's going on around you. It's a deeper level of awareness than just being observant, right?
Exactly. And this difference in approach really becomes clear when you compare the profiles you get from each platform. 16 Personalities tells you who you are with that concise personality type, while the Spiritual Seek focuses on how you think, offering insights into your mindset and those patterns of reasoning.
I love that. It's like 16 Personalities gives you the snapshot. And the spiritual seek helps you understand the picture behind the snapshot.
That's a great way to put it. And for you listening, which approach resonates more with you? Do you see yourself as fitting neatly into a personality type? Or are you more intrigued by exploring how you think and how your mind works? Welcome back to our deep dive, where we're exploring the intriguing world of personality assessments and comparing two very different approaches.
And before we dive back in, just a reminder that we're looking at 16 Personalities, the data-driven platform, and contrasting it with the spiritual seek, which takes a more philosophical lens.
Right, and the last time we left off talking about those distinct profiles, each platform generates 16 personalities, gives you that clear-cut type, while the spiritual seek delves into your thought processes.
Exactly. So let's start by unpacking the pros and cons, shall we?
Let's do it.
What are some of the benefits of that data-driven practical style that 16 Personalities is known for?
Well, I'd say one of the biggest advantages is how easy it is to grasp. The test is simple, it's quick to complete, and the results are clear and concise. This makes it a great starting point for anyone who's curious about personality assessments, but might be a bit intimidated by, the more in-depth philosophical approaches.
So it's a good way to sort of dip your toes into the world of personality. Maybe
Yeah.
take the 16 Personalities test, get that 4-letter type, and then that sparks your interest to explore further.
Exactly. It's like a gateway to deeper self-discovery. And another major benefit is that 16 Personalities is all about applying what you learn. They give you insights that you can actually use in your personal and professional life. You get career suggestions tailored to your type, advice on relationships, and even tips for improving communication and teamwork.
So it's not just about understanding yourself in this abstract way. It's about taking that knowledge and actually using it to make better decisions, right?
Absolutely. And for a lot of people, that's what they're looking for, practical tools to navigate daily life.
Right. Okay, so we've looked at the good stuff. Now, what about the flip side? What are some potential downsides to the 16 Personalities approach?
Well, one criticism is that by relying on these simplified categories and agree or disagree scales, they might be missing some of the complexity of human personality. Those 4-letter types are a good starting point, but they don't capture the full spectrum of what makes each individual unique.
It's like saying there are only 4 types of music: classical, rock, pop, and country. Sure, those are broad categories, but within each one, there's this whole universe of subgenres and styles.
That's a perfect analogy. And another potential issue is that by focusing on these fixed types, 16 personalities might unintentionally reinforce this idea that our personalities are unchanging, and that could discourage people from embracing their potential for growth and change.
Yeah, it's like being told, well, you're an introvert, so you're always going to be shy and avoid social gatherings.
Yeah.
That kind of thinking can really hold you back.
Absolutely. It's crucial to remember that personality is influenced by so many factors: our experiences, our relationships, our environment. It can definitely shift and evolve over time.
So 16 Personalities can be a great stepping stone. It has practical value, but it's important to remember that it's just one perspective.
Exactly. It's a tool. And
Yeah.
like any tool, it has its specific uses and limitations.
All right, so let's move on to the spiritual seek. What are some of the potential benefits of their more philosophical approach with its emphasis on introspection and self-reflection?
Well, one of the biggest strengths is the focus on going deep and recognizing nuances. Their tests really encourage you to think through your answers, and that leads to self-reflection and a much deeper understanding of your beliefs and assumptions.
It's like having a conversation with yourself.
Yeah,
Really looking inward to understand your own patterns of thinking.
exactly. And that introspection is incredibly valuable for growth. It helps you figure out your core values, why you do the things you do, and gain a clearer sense of how you fit into the world.
And because their whole philosophy is built on the idea of personality as ever-evolving, it encourages people to believe in their potential for change.
Absolutely. The spiritual seeks approach is all about recognizing that we're not stuck with a fixed set of traits. We have the power to shape and mold our personalities through conscious effort and self-reflection.
So it's empowering because it puts you in the driver's seat of your own growth journey. You're not just a passenger.
Exactly. And another thing I appreciate is their willingness to explore aspects of personality that go beyond those typical traits and categories you find in more traditional assessments.
You're talking about those tests like the mental age and awareness tests, right?
Yeah.
They're looking at things like mindset and perception.
Precisely. They get at those often overlooked aspects of who we are. Those tests provide a much more well-rounded understanding of personality. It's not just a list of characteristics you see, it's how you think, how you see the world, and how you interact with it.
It's like they're saying, hey, there's more to you than meets the eye. Let's dig deeper and see what we discover.
Exactly. And for many people, exploring those deeper layers can be incredibly insightful and lead to real transformation.
Okay, so we've talked about the depth, the nuance of their philosophical approach, and the focus on personal growth. But let's be fair, let's flip the coin. What are some potential downsides or limitations of the spiritual seeks approach?
One criticism is that the emphasis on personal experience and introspection might be seen as less scientific or measurable compared to something like 16 Personalities, which is all about data and statistics.
Right, so it might appeal more to people who are comfortable with ambiguity, who enjoy exploring those gray areas of personality, rather than seeking those clear-cut black and white answers.
Exactly. It's a very different approach. And another potential drawback is that their tests can be more time-consuming. They require more effort from the user. Answering those full-sentence questions demands thought and concentration. And the overall tone can feel quite serious and introspective.
Yeah, it's not exactly a lighthearted, quick personality quiz. It's more like a deep dive into your inner world.
That's right. And that might feel overwhelming or intimidating for some.
So while the spiritual seats philosophical approach has a lot to offer in terms of depth and encouraging personal growth, it's not going to be the right fit for everyone. It requires a certain level of self-awareness, a willingness to really think things through, and a comfort level with exploring those more subjective aspects of personality.
I think you've summarized it perfectly. It's all about knowing yourself and choosing the tools that resonate with you.
Okay, so we've explored the potential benefits and limitations of both platforms. But how do these two approaches, with their very different philosophies, fit into the bigger picture of personality assessments?
That's a great question. And I think it's important to remember that they're not mutually exclusive. They can actually complement each other really well.
So you're saying it's not about picking one over the other. It's about seeing them as complementary tools you can use together.
Exactly. You could start with 16 Personalities to get that quick, accessible snapshot of your personality type, and then dive into the Spiritual Seeks tests to explore those deeper layers of how you think and perceive the world.
It's like having a toolbox with different tools for different jobs, right? You wouldn't use a hammer to tighten a screw. You choose the right tool for the job.
Exactly. And in this case, the job is getting to know yourself better. And there's no single tool that can capture the full complexity of who you are.
So it's about using a combination of approaches, each offering unique perspectives and insights, to gain a richer, more nuanced understanding of yourself, your strengths, your challenges, and your potential for growth.
Precisely. And I think it's really fascinating to consider how these two approaches with their contrasting philosophies reflect those broader trends in how society views personality. Are we seeing a shift in how we perceive ourselves and our potential for change?
You know, and now that you mention it, it does feel like there's a growing interest in self-awareness and introspection these days. Like people are recognizing the importance of understanding their own thoughts, emotions, and motivations.
Definitely. And we're seeing this reflected in the popularity of things like mindfulness practices, meditation apps, and of course, personality assessments. People are craving tools and insights to better understand themselves.
And it's not just about putting yourself in a box with a label anymore, is it? It seems like there's a move away from those rigid categories and towards a more fluid understanding of personality.
Absolutely. People are less likely to say, this is who I am and that's it, and more open to the idea that they're constantly evolving and discovering new facets of themselves.
I love that. It's such a hopeful and empowering way to view ourselves. And it seems like this shift is supported by research that suggests personality isn't as fixed as we once believed. Our experiences, our relationships, our environment, all these things can shape and mold our personalities over time.
That's right. We're not just passive products of our genes. We have the ability to actively influence our own personal growth and development. And this realization is driving a greater emphasis on self-improvement. People aren't content with just knowing themselves. They want to work on becoming the best versions of themselves.
That's so inspiring. And we're definitely seeing that desire for self-improvement reflected everywhere you look. The explosion of self-help books, workshops, online courses, coaching programs.
Absolutely. It's an exciting time to be interested in personal growth because there are so many options available. And in a way, both 16 Personalities and the Spiritual Seek, despite their contrasting approaches, are tapping into this larger shift towards self-awareness, personal growth, and a more dynamic understanding of personality.
So they're both meeting a need, but in different ways. One offers those quick, practical insights. The other encourages deeper introspection and self-discovery. It's all about finding what works for you. All right, so we've explored those different philosophies behind 16 personalities and the spiritual seek, weighed the pros and cons, and even touched on how those platforms reflect broader trends in self-discovery. But let's get down to brass tacks. How can you actually use these platforms to boost your self-awareness and personal growth?
Let's get practical. I think a common challenge many people face is feeling lost when it comes to career choices. And that's where 16 Personalities, with its focus on strengths and work styles, can really shine.
So let's say you're at a career crossroads. You take the 16 personalities test, and it turns out you're an analyst. Would that then point you towards careers that require analytical skills like data science or engineering?
You got it. Or let's say you're a diplomat. Maybe social work or counseling would be a better fit. It's all about understanding your natural inclinations and finding a path that aligns with them.
Right, and it's not just about finding the perfect job, is it? 16 personalities can also help with navigating those ups and downs of workplace relationships.
Oh, absolutely. Knowing your own type and the types of your colleagues can be a game changer for communication and teamwork. Let's say you're working with someone who's a sentinel. You know they thrive on structure and order, so you'd probably approach them with a well-organized plan rather than springing a last-minute brainstorming session on them.
That makes a lot of sense. You'd be less likely to trigger their stress response that way. Okay, so we've seen how 16 personalities can be applied. How about the spiritual seek? How does its more introspective approach translate into tangible personal growth?
Let's say you're struggling with self-doubt. The spiritual seek's mental age test, which explores your mindset, might reveal that you tend toward negative self-talk or limiting beliefs.
So you might discover that your mental age is actually older than your chronological age, suggesting a more rigid or pessimistic outlook on life.
Exactly. But here's the key. The spiritual seek doesn't just point out the issue. It offers guidance on how to address it. The content often includes philosophical insights or prompts for reflection.
So if that mental age test shows that you're stuck in a negative thought pattern, you might be encouraged to explore Stoic philosophy or mindfulness techniques as ways to challenge those negative thoughts and cultivate a more positive mindset.
That's what's so powerful about the spiritual seek. It connects those insights about yourself with actual steps you can take to grow and change.
Okay, let's get even more specific. Imagine you're having trouble communicating effectively in your relationships. How would these platforms help with that?
Well, let's say you're a feeling type on 16 Personalities, which means you tend to make decisions based on your emotions and values. The platform's relationship guides might suggest that you practice expressing your needs more directly, rather than hoping your partner will just get how you're feeling.
That's helpful. How would the spiritual seek approach that same communication challenge?
Their awareness test could be really illuminating here. Perhaps your score reveals that you're not great at picking up on nonverbal cues, which could lead to misunderstandings with your partner.
Ah, so you might be missing those subtle signals like body language or tone of voice that add extra layers of meaning to what someone is saying.
Exactly. Becoming more aware of those nonverbal cues can drastically improve your communication. It's about recognizing that communication is a two-way street, where you're not only expressing yourself, but also actively trying to understand the other person's perspective.
That's a great point. And it really shows how these two seemingly different approaches, 16 personalities and the spiritual seek, can actually work together to support personal growth.
It's like having two lenses to view yourself through. One lens, 16 Personalities, gives you that clear, practical overview. And the other, the spiritual seek, invites you to explore those deeper, more subtle aspects of yourself.
And by using those two lenses together, you gain a much richer and more holistic understanding of who you are.
Precisely. It's that deeper understanding that sets the stage for real, lasting personal growth. It's recognizing that you're not just a set of traits, but a complex, ever-evolving individual with the power to learn, grow, and create positive change.
Such a powerful message. So as we wrap up our deep dive into personality assessments, what's the one key takeaway you want our listeners to remember?
Don't let your quest for self-knowledge end with the test result. Use those results, whether they're from 16 Personalities, the spiritual seek, or any other assessment, as a starting point. Let those results spark your curiosity, fuel your introspection, and ultimately empower you to live a more authentic and fulfilling life.
Beautifully said. It's not about the label, it's about the journey. It's about using these tools to unlock your potential and create a life that reflects who you truly are. Thanks for joining us on this exploration of personality assessments.